Hello. So in this section, I want to talk about normal maps. And normal maps is, the bane of several game artists' existence. There is one fundamental problem when we look at how normal maps are implemented from a game artist perspective, and that is that tangent space normal maps, which are what all characters get, have no real standard. A game engine or a normal map that works inside of Maya is not going to work inside of Max. A normal map that works inside of the Unreal game engine is not going to work in a Far Cry game engine. They all have different ways of looking at a normal map and different ways of calculating a normal map. Specifically at the edges of a UV of the UVs. That's where the bulk of all problems are going to happen. So ZMapper has a couple of options for dealing with that, but at the end of the day, it's very difficult. Sometimes involves some cleanup, some Photoshop work, things like that to get this to get a normal map to actually work inside of a game engine. But I'll present to you guys the overall problems that we're going to encounter, a few ways that you can kind of start to fix it. And just start the conversation. So we're going to use this model, this troll model here, which you can actually get from Pixelogic's download center. If you go to pixelogic.com, you go into support and download center. They have a bunch of models down at the bottom that are pretty, useful. Now, the sculpt on this, it's 1.6 million. We've got lots of detail, which is pretty cool. The low-res model is about 1.5 million polygons. Let's take a look at the frame. And I'm just going to press Shift and click Uncrease to uncrease all of these. It was creased because the model was saved in ZBrush 2, and this is just something that ZBrush 3 does. So you can see this is not a low-res game character. It's a little bit more hero, but still fairly low res, especially from a film perspective. So now, to do this, we make sure we're in the lowest subdivision level. We press ZMapper, and spin might be on by default, morph 3D might be on, so I like to turn those off. And then immediately just press Create Normal Map. You can see it's creating a normal map with all kinds of colors, greens and reds, yellows and purples, and all of these different things. And that's because it's creating a world space normal map. But a world space normal map is not going to work for us. World space or object space. Let's go into the upper right area, and if I press Texture, you can see that the front is blue, the side is yellow, back is yellow to green, and on from there. What we really need to do is press Tangent Space Normal Map and then say Create Normal Map. And notice now how there's a predominance of blue. So this is using the high res and the low res. It's just calculating the distance between them and generating a normal map. I can look at the polyframe, zoom in. It's a little sensitive. I can look at the texture. I can even morph to the UV layout. So there's my UV map. Let's turn polyframe off. Let's just freeze a target so you can see that. Now let's turn that back off. Let it go back into its 3D shape. Turn off Morph UV. And now if I exit ZBrush, or exit ZMapper I should say, let's turn frame off, you can see I've got a normal map right here, and it's created at 2K, which is the default. But if I wanted to create my own size, I might go in and say set this to 40 Let's just set it to 4,000. 4,000. I'm going to press new to create a white texture. That's 4,000 pixels by 4,000 pixels. With this one active, when I go into ZMapper, it will create a normal map that is 4,000 pixels by 4,000 pixels. Now, of course, that's way too large for any game, but I just want to show you that in order to create your own specifically sized normal map, you have to create the texture before you go into ZMapper and before you generate that normal map. Otherwise, you can just go into Photoshop and resize it. Let this just finish up here. Okay, exit out of ZMapper, and then it's all applied to a 4K texture. So we've got a 4K texture here, and we've got a 2K texture. Alright, now let's just go back into our 2K here. Go back into ZMapper, and you can see that it's being applied. But one of the things that we need to take a look at and be mindful of is how at the UV borders, which if we morph the UVs, you can see that that's where the arms are sliding apart. At those borders, the colors change. And that is where we end up getting ourselves in trouble with all these different game engines and 3D applications, because nobody is seeing it in exactly the same way. So before I do anything and get into talking about the ways to deal with this, let's just export all of this and take a look at it inside of Maya. So I'm going to say export this ZMapper troll. I'm going to export the normal map. And we'll call it ZMapper troll. And I want to export that as a TIFF. Save that. Then I'm going to go into Maya. Going to go into File, Import. I'm going to import that troll. Okay, ZMapper here. Going to rotate that. Select this, go into Normal, Soften Edge. I'm also going to check out my Hypershade, set up my network, create a blend, not two blends, one blend. In the bump map, I'm going to choose File, follow the bump map through, get to my TIFF, and looks like we've got to navigate there again. Okay, we're going to select the ZMapper troll, open that up, and then in our bump node we're going to turn this to tangent space normal map. Just exit out of all of this. Actually, gotta make sure that I assign that. So drag that one onto it. And now in order for this to take effect, we have to go into high quality rendering. We've got to press 6 on the keyboard. And right off the bat, definitely not applying correctly, but not a huge problem because I know exactly where it went astray. And so let's just graph this network. And what I've got to do is go into the 2D placement node and set my repeat V to -1. And so there you go. That's the geometry. And there's my model. Now, right here at the area between these, where the seam for the UVs is, looks pretty okay, but you can kind of see a seam right here, just running directly across there, and here, and here, and here. Getting rid of these seams is actually one of the more difficult parts of dealing with the normal map. Generating it, dealing with the sculpt, all of that is pretty simple. But getting rid of this seam requires that we dig into ZMapper and that we kind of, at some point, just acknowledge that it's going to take some fixing to do. Going to take some extra work. So let's get ourselves back into ZMapper. So we're back in ZBrush, ZMapper, and the settings that determine what the normal map is going to do right here are actually in the Expert Pass 1 and Expert Pass 2. So in there you'll see things like orthogonalize the tangent to normal, or to derive the tangent from the cross product of the normal and the binormal. And this is a lot of just complex language. Not to mention that there's one pass and then there's another pass. The second pass has similar things, derive binormal from the cross product of the normal and the tangent. And so this can be very confusing for somebody. What ZMapper allows is for you to have presets, but a lot of these presets have not been updated since Maya 7. So all we've got is the ability to go in here and say Maya tangent space best quality. But this is really for Maya 7. Let's just get in there, regenerate the normal map for this. Notice that it flipped it for us, so we won't have to do that in Maya. In fact, we'll have to undo that. Okay, now let's take a look at the texture. A little darker blue right there. So let's just exit and see what kind of difference that makes. Come back in. And let's undo the flipping that we did. Graph network. Set this to 1. And voila. Now, did it fix the seam? Not really. Because this is a totally different algorithm. Maya 2009 is different from Maya 7. So this is just one of the things that you're going to have to deal with as a game artist or as just an artist in general, is there is no real standard. The only thing that you can do to make your life easier is make sure that you lay out your UVs with as few separations as possible. And I'd say this is a pretty great job for doing that, although you may consider later on dealing with the wrists in a different way, or the hands. Now let's take a look at some of the other settings in here, just so we can get a sense of things. I'm going to skip past the projection tab right now because a lot of that can actually be done just with recreating the subdivision levels via project all and zproject. But some of these samples, smooth normals, switch red and green, all of that is part of these configurations. If we go to Expert Pass 1, you can see that the Maya presets turned on derive binormal from the cross product of normal and tangent. If I go in and I select, say, ATI's tangent space, there may be very different settings. Let's go in and select 3ds Max. Notice, very different set of settings. Derive tangent from cross product of normal and binormal. But let's return that back to there. A couple of things to be mindful of. Ray casting max scan distance. That's going to be very important for you. The rest of these I haven't had a need to touch. Up here at the top you've got polyframe. You can also turn on your tangents so that as you get in here and you start to change these things around, anything that affects a tangent is going to update on the screen, and you'll be able to see, exactly which way it's pulling. Also with the normal, just so you know which way the direction the surface is facing. Another cool thing that you can do with ZMapper is you can actually snapshot. And then you can also save that or press dispose to get rid of it. You can also go into render region, move this thing around, and you can re-render areas. Now something that ZMapper gives us is also the ability to create a cavity map. So let's just increase our cavity intensity here, and I'm going to just go create cavity map. Now you can see it's all a bunch of white dots, very different from the normal map. But this is going to give us little black lines for the recesses of the form. So we'll see this really prominently in his back area. Everywhere that the crevices are. Now we can turn render region on. I can increase my cavity blur, create cavity map, and just so you can see the difference, we can turn that back, lower our cavity intensity, and you can see, less contrast, more contrast. Now if I turn render region off, I exit out of this, we can go into the texture palette, flip this vertically so that we can see it, and then we can go up to our highest subdivision level, and here let's just turn to a gray material. You can see how that's really matching up. Let's turn it off, and then back on. So back in the day we would use this, we would go into masking, we would say mask by intensity, then we would turn the texture off, and then we would have a mask that would allow us to go in and just pull the surface forward even more. But nowadays a lot of that can be done with in the brush palette cavity masking right here, which is actually all real time. As well as that option has been moved into the ZBrush interface itself by mask by cavity. So let's clear this mask and mask by cavity. We can invert that, and we get a similar result, but it is a different algorithm. So there may still be a use for the cavity map option inside of ZMapper. It's going to be up to you to choose which one you want to work with. But I do suggest that you get in there and experiment with both of them. So now let's just go back to this texture. Let's clear it. Actually, I'm going to go into texture and press clear. Why it created yellow, I am not sure. But let's clear the mask. And I'm going to come back into texture and clear that again. It's because that's white. Clear. There we go. ZMapper. Can't do it from the highest subdivision level. Go down, go back into ZMapper, and we look at it from here. Now, these options, inflate bump map details and sharpen bump map details, have actually been disabled. They're still here, but they've been disabled for ZBrush 3.1, so we can ignore those. And the only other thing that I really want to show you is the ability to inflate high-res mesh detail. So let's just generate a normal map for this head area here. Let's cancel out of that, make sure it's a tangent space, and why don't we just zoom in so that you can see better. Create normal map. Let's lower our cavity intensity. I don't want that to get mixed in there for this case. You can mix them, and the intention originally was to combine ambient occlusion with cavity intensity, but it's not a 100% solution. So you can try it out, use it, and if it works, great. If not, just generate your ambient occlusion another way. So now I'm going to snapshot that, move this off to the side, and I'm going to inflate my high-res mesh detail. Create normal map again. And you can notice just a subtler inflation. It's just kind of pushing all of those details and those wrinkles closer together. We can lower that a bit. Do that again. There. Just adds a little bit of more oomph to the whole thing. So let's exit out of this. Polyframe, let's dispose of that. And there you go. That's a bit of an introduction into ZMapper, some of the problems that you're going to encounter, some of the issues that you need to kind of consider in terms of, do you want to get in and figure out what exactly your game engine is using in terms of its algorithm, it's the equation, or you can alternatively divide your model up, export that to Maya, and do this processing in chunks. The game artists that I know have basically broken their model up into multiple parts and brought those into, say, 3D Studio Max or Maya, and generated the normal map in there when they can't get it to work in ZMapper. That's the last-ditch effort, but in that case, you simply have to be getting back into Maya or back into ZBrush, get up to your highest subdivision level, clone this, and you can do things like go to polygroups. Let's see, let's turn frame on. We've got just one frame here. Now if we press UV groups, we're not going to get much luck, but I could go back into my base mesh, open up my window UV texture editor, and I could look at the possibility of selecting a shell and moving that into a separate UV region. And so this means that I have to move it over one full unit. So I might set this to 1 and that to 1. Oh, looks like it moved the whole thing over. Roughly getting it off in this kind of space. Okay, now what I'm going to do, let me just get this reselected again. What I'm going to do is toggle this from absolute to a relative transformation tool. And then that's going to give me the ability to say shift this over or up 1. In this case, I'm going to shift it over 1. Let's see, or there I get myself a little backwards. So I'm going to shift it over 1. Then I might grab, say, the head, right click, and I might shift that over 2. And then I might grab, let's just grab all of those and shift those over 1. And then I'm going to grab all of these, right click, control, right click to shell, and then I might move those over 3. And so those are all in separate UV regions. I can now take this mesh, export this. Okay, I'm going to call this Troll UV Shift. Then I'm going to come into ZBrush, go to the lowest subdivision level, and just by force of habit I always store a morph target there. Then I'll come to the top and I'll choose import, import the UV shift. Okay, definitely going to switch that. But it did import the different UVs, so now I can go to UV group, and you can see everything that was off into a different region became its own group. So here's the body, legs, and the head. So let's take a look at Maya again. And so here's the legs, the head's its own region, body's its own region, and then the hands and arms are their own as well. They've all been shifted off. So hands and feet just went off into their own area. And then this is going to be useful for me to break the model up along these UV regions. So to break any model up, you need to go to the highest subdivision level, mask it, isolate it, and then at the lowest subdivision level, just say delete hidden. Before I do that though, I'm going to just clone this, and then now delete hidden. Let ZBrush do its thing. When it clears the mask, then you're in good shape, and you know that all you have now is the head at the highest subdivision level. You can export this, and at 400,000 polygons, you can definitely generate a normal map inside of Maya Max or XSI. In fact, XSI is fantastic at dealing with these things and doesn't even require you to break it up. So there we go. I hope you enjoyed.